I now want to bring in a guest to explore this a little bit further. We have reached Jason Blazakis. He's a senior research fellow at the Soufan Center and a former director with the Bureau of Counterterrorism at the U.S. Department of State. And he joins us this afternoon from Washington. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to start with something that we heard there from John Kirby. He said that the U.S. now expects that with the death of the leader, that Al-Qaida will behave differently going forward. Do you agree with that? And if so, how do you think we might see them behave?
Well, I think the recent killing of Al-Zawahiri is indicative of the information the United States continues to possess regarding Al-Qaeda senior leadership. The successful attack will lead to a recalibration, I think, in how Al-Qaeda communicates, how Al-Qaeda hides its senior operatives, and more generally take a more precautionary stance. I think Al-Qaeda in some sense, and Al-Zawahiri in particular, may have gotten a little lazy. Walking around the balcony, for instance, may have given him a false sense of security. And I think the Al-Qaeda posture more generally will be defensive, at least in the short term. I think that's what Kirby was getting at there.
And what do you make of the fact that Al-Zawahiri was found in Kabul? Because, of course, we did hear from John Kirby there that the U.S. views that as a violation of that Doha agreement and believes that the Taliban has a lot to answer for now. So what do you make of the fact that he was in Kabul?
I think that's an understatement of the year. I think it really renders the Doha agreement as something that we could put in the paper shredder at this point, that we can't trust the Taliban's essentially safeguarded promises that they would not allow Al-Qaeda to have sanctuary in Afghanistan. And obviously, that's not the case. Zawahiri was found in a very posh neighborhood, living in the house of an individual who's very well connected to Siraj Haqqani, who's a specially designated global terrorist by the United States, and is also listed as a terrorist by the United Nations. So I think that's an indicator that the Taliban and Al-Qaeda relationship remains extremely strong, to the point where Al-Qaeda senior leadership felt that they had full reign, carte blanche, in Kabul.
So last night, the president didn't reveal a lot of details about the operation, but he did seem to indicate that there had been a lot of planning here and that they became aware possibly even a year ago of his whereabouts and then were working towards that. Help us understand what kind of planning and intelligence work would have gone into an operation like this.
So I think the bin Laden raid in Abbottabad and the planning cycle related to the killing of Osama bin Laden is an excellent way to demonstrate how long this process evolves. In August 2010, the United States government had a good indication as to where bin Laden may be in Abbottabad, Pakistan. And it wasn't until May of 2011 that he was killed by U.S. Special Forces. So that was nearly a year in length. And it's not surprising to me that Biden might have indicated that this could have been a year-long operation. And if that's the case, we may have had good sources on the ground and even insights as to whether or not Al-Zawahiri was in Kabul before the United States pulled out in August of 2021. It's been less than a year since the United States been out, right? So I think that is one indication that the United States planning cycle has been ongoing for quite some time. And what that planning cycle consists of is intelligence collection through numerous means, to range from human collection to communications intelligence. And just think, in terms of communication intelligence alone, the United States was in Afghanistan for more than 20 years. That country is really hardwired. The United States National Security Agency and other government agencies very likely retain a very strong and robust communications intelligence posture in Afghanistan. And Kirby, in the briefing that we just heard, said the United States can touch anywhere in Afghanistan. I would also posit the United States can listen anywhere in Afghanistan. And then it's also incumbent to remember that United States intelligence has had a $25 million reward on Ayman al-Zawahiri's head for quite some time, and that individuals could have come forward with tips that could have provided important information to the United States. And then lastly, I will say, there are a number of countries, such as Pakistan, that probably have really good information. And it's within the realm of possibility that Pakistan could have played a role in sharing, through foreign liaison services, information with the United States as well. That's just on the intelligence collection posture. Then it's the following, the pattern of life that President Biden mentioned as well. That's vitally important for those who are operating the drones, to make sure that we minimize civilian casualties, which we've done in this case, which is incredibly important.
Jason, as you've pointed out there, we are approaching that one-year anniversary of the U.S. withdrawal. The Taliban have indicated in the years since that they want to reach out to foreign governments, that they want to build relationships. We heard that from John Kirby as well. So the fact that Al-Zawahiri was found in Kabul, how is this going to possibly set back the rebuilding of Afghanistan now?
Quite possibly, pretty significantly. The countries of the world need to pause, I think, and have some distance from their relations with the Taliban. I think what happened here, what was illustrated that Al-Zawahiri was in Kabul, is indicative that the Taliban's promises are something we can't actually take seriously. We've seen it time and again as it relates to women's rights in Afghanistan, human rights more generally, and their ability to check ISIS. The growing threat from the ISIS Khorasan province remains a very pronounced threat. So I think it's time to take some measure, take a step back, and encourage the Taliban, once the countries of the world can unite on this, to put additional pressure on them, because now the pressure should be full bore. The Taliban wants to be removed from sanctions lists. They want to become part of the international community, and they can't do that right now unless they make significant concessions as it relates to human rights and women's rights in particular.
Okay, final question here, final thoughts. Something else that we heard from John Kirby is that the U.S. is committed to making sure that Afghanistan does not become a safe haven or a breeding ground for Al-Qaida, again, for other terrorist networks. The fact that the U.S. no longer has service members there, they don't have that footprint, how do you think the U.S. is going to proceed now in terms of making sure that Afghanistan doesn't become a safe haven once again?
Well, Kirby said in the press briefing that this was an example of a victory for over-the-horizon strategy. And I think it was, but it was one example of the United States being able to take out a senior leader within Afghanistan without having boots on the ground. And it's very well possible that the United States collection process and information we had on Al-Zawahiri was information that we had before we left. So how the United States is going to do this moving forward, it's going to require the United States to continue to have collaboration with countries in the region that may have assets in country, whether it's Pakistan or other countries that retain some kind of embassy or mechanism to interact with the Taliban. The Taliban certainly has information on the Haqqanis and Al-Qaeda senior leaders. They very well are collaborating at a very high level, as Kirby intimated. The best thing the United States can do at some future point is to work with the Taliban to get information on Al-Qaeda. But I just don't see that happening in the near term. If anything, what we're seeing is the Taliban relationship with Al-Qaeda remains robust.
Jason, thank you so much for making some time for us this afternoon. We really do appreciate all your insights and your perspective there. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Jason Blazakis is a senior research fellow at Soufan Center and a former director within the Bureau of Counterterrorism at the U.S. Department of State, and he joined us from Washington.